Turn the lights back on. Wow. Retro electro tech. When real audio ruled the world.
Greetings once again, ladies and gentlemen. This is Retro Ernest of Retro Electrotech, and I'm wrapping up this Pioneer SX828. I have all of the replacement electrolytics on the control board. In addition, I cleaned up all funky looking solder joints while I was installing the replacement electrolytics and just removed any excess flux from the board. So everything is looking really good here. Oh, and another important point that I almost forgot to mention is be sure that after installing your replacement components that you take some time to examine the board carefully. I use a magnifier and just go through to be sure that there is no solder joints or traces bridged together that, well, I don't want bridged together. That would stink to close everything up, button everything up, and you have something bridged in there causing some problems. So I just wanted to mention that. Okay, what we're looking at here is the back of the main amp board. I have all the capacitors installed. There wasn't very many electrolytics on this main amp board, but they're all installed, not soldered in, but you can see the leads here kind of dangling around. I'm not going to solder them up until I receive some KSA 992s that I ordered. I do have some in stock, but not in the HFE range that I wanted to use for the differential pairs that I'm replacing on this board. The differential pairs that I'm replacing, the 2SA 726s that are known to be problematic with age, those originals all had a gain range in the 330-ish kind of range. So the KSA 992s that I have in stock were a little bit too far out of that range. I feel better if I get them a little bit closer. So I'm just waiting for those to come in, and then I'm going to match up a quad of those for the differential pairs, get everything soldered in. And one more thing that I also have to do. Okay, what we are zoomed in on is the heatsink and our 4 output transistors, obviously. Well, maybe I shouldn't say obviously because it might not be obvious to some people. Nonetheless, I'm going to be removing these 4 TO3 package output transistors, cleaning their mounting surfaces and the heatsink, and reapplying heatsink compound adequately. It looks like the heatsink compound was applied pretty thin. In fact, I only see the heatsink compound on this transistor, and these other 3, yeah, it looks pretty scarce. So somebody did replace these 2 output transistors here and here. The originals are 2SC1080s. This is an NTE 280 and an LX 280. These two 2SA 680 Toshibas are original. So anyways, the point is the heatsink compound was not adequately applied. You don't want to apply it too thick, but you don't want to apply it too thin. And here we are back at the heatsink with the output transistors removed. Only one transistor had a little bit of a heatsink compound applied to it. The rest of them really had none that I could see. I couldn't even see any residue. The mica pads were all intact, and when I carefully peeled them away from the heatsink, the only thing that was left behind that I could see was what appeared to be a substance with the consistency of like a hard lacquer. In fact, I had to literally scrape it off with this X-Acto knife so that I could achieve a smooth surface, so that when I reinstall the transistors with the new heatsink compound applied, everything will sit nice and flush, which is what you want. You don't want any rough spots on the surface or anything. You want to get it as smooth as possible. I am going to install new mica pads, but other than that, I'm going to get everything cleaned up and then move forward from there. And by the way, here's the 4 output transistors, and you can see that there's no, and I didn't even clean these, this is just the way they are, there's no heatsink compound, you know, again, to speak of on these, except for the one I already showed you, which has a tiny bit. Same thing on the, you know, on the mica pad here. There's a little bit, but not very much. It's inadequate. And again, there was a second pad on this one here, so yeah, and not really anything at all. So I'm gonna get some, you know, I'm gonna clean these up a little bit and get some compound on these and go from there. And there they are. The transistors are mounted back onto the heatsink. I didn't even clean around the edges of the transistors. What's smushed out from around the edges is exactly the way you see it. And it actually smushed out nice and neat. It's not all over the place. I only wiped the body of the transistors off a little bit, as I mentioned, because of, you know, the stuff that got on my fingers and I was touching the transistors and all that. So I wiped those off just a little bit. But other than that, you know, once you tighten those things down to the heatsink, they're going to self-regulate the amount of heatsink compound that is going to be sitting between the transistor and the heatsink. You know, any excess gets pushed out, and what's left underneath is a nice thin, even layer. So again, don't get caught up in all that nonsense about the exact amount and all that. The only thing to that is you don't want to apply too much, or else it's going to be a very, very messy job when you smush all that crap out from underneath the transistors, and you're going to have a lot to clean up after if you don't want it to look like crap. And if you apply too little, well then, you know, you're risking adequate heat dissipation and heat transfer. If it's kind of thin and blotchy, it's not even on the surface, then that can be an issue. But otherwise, yeah, just a modest amount, apply it evenly to the surface and you'll be just fine. And here we are. Everything is completed. The boards are back in. Wiring is all cleaned up. I zip tied everything. Everything looks nice and tidy down here, as it should. The only thing I did off camera was a quick and safe power up on the current limiter. I'm not going to get into that because, you know, I did a few videos getting into those details, you know, safe power ups and, you know, current limiters and all that. So if you want more information on that, just, you know, leave me a comment. I don't mind tracking down those videos and sending you the links if you're interested in more information. But I just don't want to do safe power ups and explain current limiting and all that in every video. But anyways, this thing powered up nicely. It wasn't trying to run away to short circuitville or otherwise draw heavy current. Everything's looking good there. The only thing I'm going to do before going into audio testing now is check for any DC offset, check the idle current. If I have to make some adjustments accordingly, I will do so. And then otherwise, before I move forward, I just want to say that yes, this receiver needs more work. No ifs, ands, or buts about it. It would benefit from a full electrolytic recap ideally, but at the very least, the power supply should be the next on the list, because, you know, the power supply is the heartbeat of this unit. Without a heartbeat, nothing happens. So ideally, at the very least, a full electrolytic recap, and have the power supply evaluated a little bit more, and, you know, go through and check the values of various components and all that. Just make sure everything is working as it should. Ideally, I don't have the time to do that right now, but maybe down the road, when my schedule kind of eases up a little bit, which I'm working toward, and maybe the budget, you know, you're able to get a little bit more budget together on this. This would be my next recommendation, is the power supply. And then after that, or if you want to go further, that tuner board needs some attention as well. So anyways, that's that. So let me go ahead and get into, again, checking the DC balance and the idle current, and we'll go from there. Okay, so now I'm setting the DC balance, and I'm doing that by adjusting a trimmer pot for the right channel down through this opening here. We have our right and our left trimmer pots down in there. So obviously we want it as close to zero as possible, and it took some playing around to get it down to, you know, it's bouncing around between like 0.3, 0.5 or whatever. It's just kind of bouncing around. But that's pretty darn good, considering we want it as close to 0 as possible. We don't want any DC or as little DC as possible on the speaker outputs. So anyways, that's really all there is to it. So that's pretty good for the right channel. Let me jump on over to the left. Okay, and here's our left channel here. You can see it bouncing around 0.5 to 1 volt, 1 point something. Nonetheless, nice and low. Like I said before, we want to get it as close to 0 as possible. But you know, getting it down to 0, that's not going to happen. But as long as the DC is in the low millivolts, we're looking good. So let me go ahead and move on to our idle current adjustment and see where we are there. Okay, so I'm setting the idle current for the right channel, and you can see I'm right about 28.8 to 29, right, let's just say 29 millivolts, close enough, which is a little high for this setting. We want to be right about 20. So I'm going to get the adjustment tool down in there and tweak around with that trimmer pot and get it down a little bit for the right channel. And I'm not going to hover over and show where I'm hooked up, because I don't have the means to, you know, suspend the camera over the unit here and zoom down in there and all that. I don't have a boom, in other words, is what I'm saying, and I really don't want to hand hold it while I'm trying to do the adjustment. So, but what I will do, so that I can help you guys out that are trying to do this adjustment, and for some of you newer guys, I'll just kind of show you on the board layout here what's going on. There's two areas that you can hook up to. If we were looking at the bottom of the circuit board and it was transparent, this is what would be on the top side, okay? So there's multiple pins on the top of the board here, and you know, obviously these are our output transistors here for the right channel, okay? So you can hook on to post 12 and 18, okay? So you want your positive probe on 12 and your negative probe on 18. I'm hooked up to the emitter resistors. You see the emitter resistors here? These are those big 5 watt half ohm resistors, okay? Those big ceramic resistors. So anyways, I'm hooked up here and over here, okay? It's kind of difficult because I'm looking through the back of the camera and everything looks tiny. So, and that's the reading I'm getting there, that, you know, 29 volts or millivolts, excuse me, or close enough. So again, I'm gonna tweak things until I get it down to where I need to get it, and then I will be right back. Okay, so I got it where it needs to be. It was pretty tough getting it there because it's such a touchy little trimmer pot that you have to adjust. You just barely put a little pressure on it and it jumps all over the place. So that's the nature of these old single turn pots. So that's why, you know, if it was my unit, I would install multi-turn pots to make that a bit easier to deal with. But it's not my unit, so it's not going to happen. So I'm going to switch on over to the to the other channel there and check the idle current and set it accordingly. Okay, and here we are on the left channel, and we're sitting pretty good where we are. It's at about 21 millivolts, good enough, and it bounces around down to 20, you know, and so forth. So it's jumping around a little bit, but it's close enough. I'm not going to mess with it because it's such a finicky little adjustment. So that's that. Anyways, where am I hooked up? Okay, in case you guys want to know, again, on the top side of the board, you're going to be hooking up to your negative probe to 17, okay, here, or number 11 with your positive probe, 11 positive, 17 negative. And I'm hooked up to the resistors, okay, opposite ends of these two resistors here. Okay, I have my negative probe clipped onto this end of the resistor R, what is it? R45, okay? And then my positive probe on this end of R43, is that 43? Yeah, 43. Because I'm trying to look at that little tiny print. Well, it looks tiny when looking through the back of the camera. So there you have it. That'll work either one. You can either hook up to the posts or hook up to the ends of the resistors there. Good enough. So let me go ahead and move on and do some more testing, get an audio signal into this thing and play around a little bit, and we'll go from there. Okay, so I have this receiver hooked up to an 8 ohm dummy load. I have a 1 kilohertz tone piped in. This is rated at 54 watts per channel into 8 ohms, and it's outputting 59.95 watts. So we're doing pretty good. Now let me go ahead and get into a little bit of audio testing. Okay, now for a brief audio demo for what it's worth, considering that this is going to be recorded on the built-in camera microphone and then of course uploaded to YouTube. So hey, it is what it is. So anyways, let's get started. Okay, and let me switch on over to FM.
Auto Body, your full-service collision repair center, 957 Lakewood Road in Madison.
Playing country's greatest hits. That's kind of our thing. Turn it up. Doesn't get any better than that.
Real music.
True Country 93.5.
Okay, I don't want to play anything copywritten. The other stuff is all YouTube music. So anyways, it's sounding good considering that this unit needs much more work, as I mentioned before, but based on what I did, hey, you know, it's better than it was. So I'm gonna keep it in the shop here for another couple days, do some more testing, just kind of run it in the shop, make sure that if anything is going to poop the bed, that it's going to do so while it's sitting here, or if there's anything as far as audio issues or anomalies. Again, I want to see if I witness it. So that's about it. As I always say, peace, love, music, and the vintage audio that brings it to your ears. Till next time.
This is a poor man's shoe production.